بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. عظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا بسيدنا ومولانا أبي عبد الله الحسين عليه السلام، وجعلنا الله وإياكم من الطالبين بثأره بين يدي الإمام المنصور المؤيد المهدي من آل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا وعظيمنا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد، وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وأصحابه الغر الميامين. الحمد لله الذي جعلنا من المتمسكين بولاية سيدي ومولاي علي بن أبي طالب. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. أما بعد، يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين، حبيب لا يجيب حبيبا. 1 year later or 40 days later, a question that is asked by many concerning the journey from Karbala back to Karbala. Indeed, you find in some communities there is a belief that the family of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam returned back to Karbala within 40 days. Having left Karbala on the 10th or around the 11th of Muharram, and returning to Karbala around the 20th of Safar. Then in other communities there is the belief that they came back the year after on the 20th of Safar. So you find that in many of the Arab cultures, for example, and many of the Imam Bargas in the Arabic-speaking world, or the Husayniyas in the Arabic-speaking world, you'll find that normally the Arba'een is meant to be the journey from Karbala to Kufa, to Sham, back to Karbala, returning on literally the Arba'een of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. But then in the Indo-Pak subcontinent, you find that many are raised with majalis which tell them that they returned, the companions or the family members of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, returned back to Karbala, having spent a year, for example, in the prisons of Sham, and then returned back on the 20th of Safar. This, on the one hand, is not a discussion for us to have a heated argument about. At the end of the day, for us, the 20th of Safar, either way, in honoring the 40th of any marhum, but especially the grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, no doubt the heavens and the earth weep upon the death of a believer for 40 nights or so. But on the other hand, there is a need for us to dissect this, because there have been many great scholars who have sought to dissect this particular area. That when we say the Arba'een of Imam al-Hussein, are we simply saying 40 days, like how we would do, for example, an Arba'een majlis or a Chalism or majlis in honor of someone who has died 40 days later? Or do we believe that there is evidence that there was a return back to Karbala within 40 days? And so the meeting that takes place between, for example, Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam and Jabir bin Abdullah al-Ansari on the 40th, is that literally 40 days later? Is that the following year 40 days later? Is there even a reality to the concept of a particular meeting at Karbala? Or is this, for example, the 20th of Safar, referring to their return to Medina? Because you may find some who may say that the 20th of Safar is when they return to Medina. So the ulama themselves, many of the greatest ulama have sought to discuss this. If you look at the works of, for example, Allam al-Amini, Ibn Tawus, Allam al-Majlisi. You look, for example, Shaykh al-Tusi. You look at others, such as the likes of Muhaddith al-Nuri. You come towards the likes of contemporary scholarship, such as, for example, Shaykh Abbas al-Qummi, and then even amongst us alive today, the likes of Ayatollah al-Karbasi, who has written a voluminous work on this area, as well as Syed Ali Qadi, who has also discussed the Arba'een. You find that a number of scholars have sought to look at this area because, on the one hand, there are some who say that it's impossible. How do you go through a few countries and come back 40 days later? Karbala to Kufa by itself is an arduous journey. If I'm going to walk from Karbala towards Kufa, for example, that's going to take me some time. And then if I go, for example, from Kufa through certain villages and cities which have hate towards me, then I'm not exactly going to be walking plain sailing. I'm going to be facing a situation where I'm going to have to stay in a couple of these places. You add up all of those days, there seems to be no disagreement that they reach Sham at the beginning of Safar. That there is no disagreement on. I think you'll find that everybody agrees that Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, Sayyidah Zainab, and the rest of the beloved of Al Muhammad reach Sham at the beginning of Safar. The question then arises is, how long do they stay in the prisons of Yazid, for example, or the ruins of Sham? Do they stay for 3 days? Do they stay for 7 days? Do they stay for a year? And if they do, then when exactly are they released? When do they go to Karbala? And when do they go towards Medina? So you find in our communities there is this difference of opinion. And that's why you may find completely diverse ends of the spectrum. On the one hand, you may find some who say, I don't believe in none of this Arba'een stuff. And then on the other hand, you find those who swear by the 40th of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, that definitely this interaction took place and that exactly 40 days later they were able to return back to Karbala. Let us tonight examine this key discussion and see what are the different viewpoints that are posited in this area. What are the camps who are against the concept of 40th the same year? Why are they against it? Why do they go towards a direction that it could not have been? And then look at the arguments of those who are pro-Arba'een of the same year. And what are the different points that they make in relation to, for example, Ziyarat al-Arba'een being one of the signs of the mu'min, works of, for example, tradition where Imam al-Sadiq teaches a ziyarah called Ziyarat al-Arba'een of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, as well as the power of the sermons of Sayyidah Zainab and Imam Zayn al-Abidin enforcing Yazid there and then to allow them to return. Let's examine this and dissect this topic in complete depth. Let's try and understand the timeline over here. When we're looking at what happens, 10th of Muharram takes place. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam dies around an hour before Maghrib on the 10th of Muharram. We then have Sham Ghariba. The following day, there is this need to move towards Kufa. You've got to go to the big men. Umar bin Sa'ad has to go to his superiors. One of them is who? Ibn Ziyad in Kufa. The other is who? Yazid, all the way in Sham. So therefore, there is a need to press ahead. We need to get to Kufa. And Ibn Ziyad has to have his day of pomp. Because this Ibn Ziyad, only a couple months earlier, was wondering whether the people of Kufa were going to actually finish him. Had he not seen the principles of Muslim bin Aqil, he should have been killed. Reality is, Hani bin Urwa and others were waiting for him to get stabbed. And Muslim bin Aqil says, we don't come from behind and stab someone. You stab someone in the front, not in the back. So what happens is that Ibn Ziyad now wants to wait for them to arrive. They arrive into Kufa, and we're in Kufa now, and it's the 12th of Muharram. Then the idea is that there is a period that they stay in Kufa, most agree, for 1 week, and then from there a journey to Sham. A journey to Sham that would take around how long? Would take around 13 days. From here, the problems arise. And that's why you see that the group who are against the concept of this whole journey, Karbala, Kufa, going through northern Iraq, going through then, one may argue, parts of modern day Lebanon like Baalbek, then going towards Halab, Raqqa, and then going into Damascus. They're like, this journey, forget that it's too long already for someone to come back. But then on the way back, if you're going to go that whole route, on the way back is going to be too difficult. So for them, the group that says that we are against this, their first point is time frame. They're like, it doesn't make any sense that you could say that within 40 days, exactly, you're going to go from Karbala to Kufa to Sham, back to Karbala, for a number of reasons. Which reasons? They say, firstly, any human being, how much can you really walk? If you're looking at, say, for example, you know, Kufa to Damascus is how long? 900 km. Karbala to Damascus is how long? 800 km. Then if you double that, if you now need to return back towards this area, how many kilometers does that make it? One may say 1800 and 1600 km, respectively. They say for a human being to walk that far is literally impossible for you to say that it's going to be completed, that whole journey. For you to say that journey to be completed, if we were to say it's a 40-day journey, 1,800 kilometers divided by 40, what does that come to? That comes to quite a big number. It would need how long? One would say it would need over 30 days, for example. That is no stopping, continuous walking, having to walk at quite a fast pace as well. How many human beings would average 30, 40 kilometers of walking a day? It's pretty intense. So their first argument is that it's pretty intense for a person to average 40 km. We then believe as well that they say that they're chained up. If you're chained up, how are you going to do 40 km a day? Because if you're going to be chained up and you're expecting to finish, you may be just about lucky if you do 2 km, 3 km. You have to go through a real power trip. But for a person to then do 40 km over 40 days, 1600 km, they say again, if you claim that Zainab alayhi salam is chained to Kulthum is chained to Imam is chained to Sukaina, and all of them are chained to each other, and they have to stop at certain places, and they have to sleep at those places. In some cases, you don't get up straight away to walk. You may have to sit there for 2-3 days. So they say, secondly, that's again next to impossible. Thirdly, they say Ibn Ziyad, when he receives them, Ibn Ziyad realizes that there's a sense of uproar in Kufa. Whether that has an effect on his decision to let them go or no is another issue. Because I think it's played up too much that Ibn Ziyad got ruffled by the people of Kufa and he thought, you know what, let me send them to Sham. I think there's already orders from Sham that are already there for Ibn Ziyad that he has to send. But they say Ibn Ziyad would have had to have written a letter to Yazid, waiting for when Yazid gives him the order to send. Today, if I write a letter and I want to send it, I normally am able to send it. How long will it take for it to reach, for example, another city? How long? Next day? Can you do, for example, first class, next day, whatever? Then a person might say, might take a couple of days, 3 days. In those days, you have barid, okay? And if you have barid, by the way, there is a tariq, a particular route called tariq al-barid, which the Umayyads used to use when they needed something sent urgently. For example, from Damascus to Medina. But here, we're not talking that fast route. Mind you, I want to remember the fast route because that's a very important point. Because there's 2 routes. You can either go a northern route to Sham or you could go to a southern. Or you could reconcile the 2 eventually in this lecture. So what happens is that with the Umayyads, the point of those who are saying that there's no way you could do it in 40 days is that they're saying Ibn Ziyad writes a letter to Yazid. If he's written a letter to Yazid, how long is that letter going to take? They're going to say 20 days it takes just for a letter to reach. So now, let's do our calculation. If now they are in Kufa, and it takes 20 days for a letter to reach Yazid, Imagine if it's taken 20 days at the minimum. When has that letter reached Yazid? If you're in Kufa, 12th of Muharram, at the minimum, when has the letter reached Yazid if you do 20 days later? 2nd of Safar. Yazid reads the letter, at the minimum returning back towards Ibn Ziyad. How many days later? Okay, let's give benefit of that. 15 days, he needs to make it very quickly. Look, get on that horse. Although we all know very well, horse versus camel. On longer trip, camel's the winner. On a shorter distance, horse is the winner. Longer distance, the camel is the winner. And there is a caveat in what I've just mentioned, because I want us to always remember the difference between the argument of walking and the argument of being on a camel. Anyway, so what you have therefore is if it goes 20 days to Yazid, by the time it reaches Yazid, Yazid has it, Yazid now sends it back. We've reached 20th of Safar, and there is no such thing as kafila coming back. Ibn Ziyad still hasn't been given the all clear. Because those who may go towards the idea of 1 year in prison may have a point. Because they're saying, hold on a minute. The exchange of information even, on the one hand, takes a while. So when they're saying that 1 year, maybe not 1 year completely in prison, but by the time they reach Sham, they stay in Sham. Maybe they reach Sham late Safar, they stayed until Yazid let them go. So the argument that they posited was Ibn Ziyad, if he's going to send a letter to Yazid. Letter is not like today, I go first class stamp and it's there. Letter is not like today, courier service and it reaches. In those days, it's going to take a long time. So this idea that you're saying that they left very quickly and they reached Sham, they disagree with this whole idea completely. Further than that, they say, why would Yazid let them go so quickly? Yazid wants to parade them. Yazid wants to show his power. If Yazid gives in, then people will say, that's how easy it is to get past Yazid. So Yazid, what would he do? He'll put you in prison and he'll be like, listen, anyone else messes, if I could do this to the grandchildren of Muhammad, who's left? If Muhammad's own grandchildren, I can parade on the streets and I could put them in prisons, then I will keep them here in prisons. Because that group that's against the idea of Arba'een, they come forward and they say, in Kufa you've got prisons, in Sham you've got prisons. If you're talking moving, how about the prisons they stayed in? You would have to move literally non-stop without stopping anywhere to reach that ideal goal of the Arba'een. Whereas we know very well that they stayed there. How long did they stay there? They didn't just stay there surely 1 week. Surely would Yazid keep them there for only 1 week? Surely Yazid, if you're an emperor, would want to keep them there longer than 1 week. So you see the arguments that they posit, then they add another argument. What do they say? They say, look at the contradictions. Some narrations say 3 to 7 days. Some say a month. Some say more than a month. And they say, look at the irony of all ironies. This is an important point. They say, well, how ironic it is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides that they will return on the Arba'een of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Look how ironic that is. That why would they return exactly on the 40th? They say this is irony. You guys just want to add up the story to make it seem like a fairy tale. That it's his Chalismo Majlis, his Arba'een Majlis. Best place to do it is in Karbala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made sure what a plan this was. This is ironic. These guys are living in fairy tales. Say maybe we believe that 20th of Safar they reached, maybe they reached Medina one day on the 20th of Safar. But this idea of exactly 40, they say if you look at the time frame, which human being can walk these countries and then be let off by the most cruel emperor in early Islam and then return back towards Karbala? So you see their arguments, all of their arguments have points. I think their points in some cases are justified. In other cases, I think they're valid. It's not for me to sit here and dictate to somebody that if you're pro this or you're against this. These are the academic discussions, and amongst them, these are the points against the Arba'een, where they continue to say that we don't have so many traditions talking about Ziyarat al-Arba'een. We don't have so many traditions that say exactly on the 40th they return to Karbala. You want to go to Karbala to honor the Arba'een of the death of Imam al-Hussein? Yes. At the end of the day, we should remember Majalis 40 days later. You remember someone who has died. Further than that, they say that if Imam al-Askari says one of the 5 signs of the mu'min is that they do Ziyarat al-Arba'een. How many times have you heard this? That one of the signs of the mu'min is Ziyarat al-Arba'een. They say that Ziyarat al-Arba'een means visiting 40 mu'mins. They say Ziyarat al-Arba'een is to visit 40 mu'min. Not visit Imam al-Hussein on the 40th. Visit 40 mu'min. You have how many mu'mineen in your area? You may have, for example, 40. So Imam al-Askari alayhi salam said, go visit 40 of them. Go knock at their door, say Salamu alaykum, you're a mu'min. I've come to visit you. Make me a cup of tea if you don't mind. Salamu alaykum, you're a mu'min. I want to show that I'm a mu'min, so I want to come and visit you. Make sure you get 40 of them. They say that this tradition that comes from Imam al-Askari alayhi salam that says one of the signs of the mu'min is ziyarat al-arba'in, is ziyarat of 40 mu'min. In, for example, London, you know 40 mu'mins, go visit them. This is the meaning. Ahl al-Bayt wanted you to go towards the visiting of 40 of the mu'mineen. So you see, all of these arguments that they put forward are arguments to try and highlight, and that's why you'll find those of them who push some of these, they won't be too fast. If someone goes Chahlum, for example, or Arba'in, they don't get too fast. Alhamdulillah, the more the merrier. But then you'll find others of them adamant. Don't encourage these things. Don't let people, what is this Karbala on the Arba'in? This is all bid'ah. This is innovation. We never had this before. It's as if there's no other fight but this issue. There's nothing else to fight about except this area. At the end of the day, even if someone's niyyah is I'm going to Karbala to honor the 40th majlis of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, whether Jabir met Imam Zayn al-Abidin in Karbala, whether Bibi Zainab returned to Karbala, I'm going to honor my Imam. As in my marhumeen, when they die, I've got a 40th majlis. Abu Abdullah, I'm not going to have one for him. My own marhumeen, who have done nothing but simple service for Islam, I give them a chalice more arba'in majlis. And Abu Abdullah, I think twice about his arba'in. But you see, there are certain people, everything related to Imam al-Hussein, they want to put a question mark on. This ziyarah, question mark. This ziyarah, question mark. This issue, question mark. There's nothing else. Only what things we do, we have to put a question mark on all of them. However, let's see those who are pro this, because that would be interesting. And of them, there are two. One who passed away, one who's still alive, living in London, and is one of the best of the muhaqqiqeen, or the researchers and depth scholars that we have on these areas. The one who passed away, Syed Ali Qadi Tabatabai, who had written the proofs of the Arba'in. It's a text which is available in Farsi. And the other one who's alive is Ayatollah al-Kurbasi, who lives in London. Ayatollah Muhammad Sadiq al-Kurbasi, Sheikh al-Kurbasi, who has written so much that I don't think anyone has written on Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam as much as he's worked on Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. I think now he's reached the 100 volume of Imam al-Hussein, and he's looking to reach 900 volumes on Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And I don't know if there are any human beings who have ever lived who people have written 900 volumes just related to them. The family of Hussein, the poetry on Hussein, the background of Hussein, the Karbala, every single area you can imagine related to Karbala and Ashura, they have written on. What Ayatollah al-Kurbasi did, which unfortunately many people have not read and not seen, is that he's done the map through research, through literature, the map of every stop Ahl al-Bayt stopped in from Karbala to Kufa. From Kufa, you don't just take a flight to Sham, you have to stop at about how many stops? Maybe about 35, 36, 37 stops. He's even looked for the time they stopped and the time they remained and where they stopped and what the people have said to them, and he's drawn it all in a diagram through his study of the sources. Anyone who wants to come to me and say that there is no proof that they went from Karbala to Kufa to Sham back to Karbala in 40 days, ask Ayatollah al-Kurbasi for his opinion. See how he has drawn a map. This is the map of Iraq. That time, for example, the map of Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, that whole area. These are the hadiths that we have, step by step, where they went, how long they stayed, what they did, and so on. What is the reply that these two, Sayyid Ali Qadi Tabatabai and Ayatollah al-Kurbasi, what are the points that they give back? Of the first points that they give back is, you're mistaken if you're talking of walking. They were all on camels riding. A camel can ride, in some cases, 40 to 50 kilometers a day. Yes, you may find a lazy camel that could do, for example, 15 km a day. You can find a camel that can do how many? Can do 40 to 50 km a day. You know, a camel can contain even its thirst for maybe a month. In some cases, it could go through the deserts. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran many times say, have you not seen the way we created the camel? This is just an accident that you have an animal that can guide you in such a way, can walk through the desert and carry that which no one else can carry. they say that many have the assumption there was walking towards there. No, he said they used camels. They went on those camels. Now, if they used those camels, and we're saying that these camels can do 50 km a day, if you're leaving Kufa on the 19th of Muharram, and you get to Safar, you get to the 2nd of Safar, you get to Sham. How many days is that? Say, for example, 12, 13 days. Maybe even just a couple more days than that. I'm saying 50 km as possibly an average. In some cases, you're going to go quicker. Why do you go quicker? Because in many of the stops, people were throwing things at the soldiers of Shimr, hating them because they realized that was the head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. So you're going to have to go quick. You also have to go quick. Why? Because Yazid wants that head. You also have to go quick. Why? Because you want money as well. You want to be given a handsome reward. So you can imagine them going the long route, the northern route, let's say Mosul, Tikrit, Baalbek, other areas, for example, such as Halab. That route is the long route. But that route, if you're doing a camel 50 km a day, for example, 60 km a day, you can finish it within how long? 12, 13 days. We say that Ahlul Bayt, salawatullah wa salamu alayhim, where were they? They were in Kufa on the 19th of Muharram. They left Kufa, they reached Sham on the 1st or the 2nd of Safar. So therefore, those who say there's a time frame problem, we've proved that on the long route, you can have camels that take you there. On the way back, Ahlul Bayt didn't come back on the long route. Ahlul Bayt came back on the faster route on the way back. What they used to call Tariq al-Barid. Remember earlier I said that you want to send a letter quickly, there's a fast route. The first route that they went on, 37 stops. The second route they went on, 9 stops. Why wouldn't you go back the other way? Why would Yazid not send them back the way they came? Because if you've already been given a hard time coming from Kufa through that way, you want to go back again with Ahlul Bayt through the way which people are angry with you already on? So which way are you going to take? Yazid tells Na'man ibn Bashir, father-in-law of Mukhtar al-Thaqafi, he tells him, take them back on the shorter way. Which route? Which is called Badiyat al-Sham, for example. Tariq al-Badiya, or it's called Tariq al-Barid, a much shorter route on the way back. Contrast to the route that they went on, which was the longer route at the beginning. So what do we have firstly? We have firstly this idea that people think that they walked the whole way. No, they were on camels, and these camels took them all the way, and the camel could go at a faster pace. That is number one. Number two, when we come to this area and they say that Ziyarat al-Arba'in means Arba'in mu'min. Now, I've seen some things in my time. Ziyarat al-Arba'in means to visit Arba'in mu'min. First, the alif and lam in al-Arba'in. Alif and lam lil-ahad. Lil-ahad means what? It means that there is a specific group or specific event that is being referred to, which people are aware of. Get me the book. Get me that book. For example, you know then which book we're referring to. Or this book, we know exactly which book it refers to. In contrast to, for example, any book. When it comes to Arba'in, it didn't say Ziyarat Arba'in. Ziyarat al-Arba'in. Alif, lam makes a huge difference. And many of the ulama have commented on this, that the alif and lam means that there is already a knowledge of that arba'in. Someone says, yeah, but Imam al-Askari's time, who had the knowledge of arba'in of Imam al-Hussein that they would come back? Because Imam al-Sadiq had already told his companion. In Tahdib al-Ahkam of Shaykh al-Tusi already, read the ziyarah on the arba'in of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. So there was already a recognition of a ziyarah in the time of Imam al-Sadiq. By the time Imam al-Askari says ziyarat al-Arba'in, not Ziyarat Arba'in. If it was Ziyarat Arba'in, it means Ziyarah of 40. Ziyarat al-Arba'in. Ziyarah of what? Of the Arba'in. The Arba'in. A particular understanding here of the Arba'in means who? Which the Arba'in? Means the event related to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. I heard one of them say, yeah, but you know this chain is mursal. It's not connected. The chain of Imam al-Hasan's hadith on Ziyarat al-Arba'in. Well, you can use that when you're talking of issues of fiqh. We're talking of issues of history. You want to go hard, then you go hard on a hadith, for example, about fiqh, because that's Allah's command. I need to make sure it's correct, the hadith. History is neither here or there in Allah's commands. If it's something about halal and haram, I need to see, is the chain connected, is it not connected? Hey, this is a historical issue. So you find, firstly, the time frame is clear, that you can travel with the camels and you can make that journey. Secondly, ziyarat al-arba'in is referring specifically to what? That one of the alamat of the mu'min is to perform the ziyarah of the arba'in, of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Thirdly, when you say it's ironic that Allah planned it to be the arba'in, those who say, for example, that they stayed in Sham for 1 year, they say that you guys who say that it's 40 days, no, it was 1 year in Sham, then they came back on the 20th of Safar the year after. I find it ironic that they came back exactly on the 20th of Safar the year after. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala planned it in that way, that we'll keep you in prison, but we'll make sure that by the 20th of Safar, you're at the Arba'in Mahsin the following year. The same irony card could be played in both ways. Yes? In the same way that you say that how comes 40 days within the same year? Well, I could reply back by saying 1 year in Sham, and then subhanallah, Yazid decides, let me release you so that you make it to Karbala for ziyarah of the Arba'in. The same irony card could be played. Number 4, Yazid, they say, is such a cruel emperor, he wouldn't just release, but he would release after the sermons of Zainab and Zain al-Abidin alayhim as-salam. Yes. Why? Because Yazid, no doubt, his arrogance had shone through. No one can deny that. Yazid had already told some of the ambassadors he had welcomed, any of these girls, look at them, Sukaina, these, if you want them as a slave, take them. He had already made this clear. His arrogance came through in poking the eyes of Imam al-Hussein, in playing with the teeth of Imam al-Hussein. His arrogance had come clear. In ordering people to hit the ladies of Al Muhammad, to poke their waists with spears. It had already shone through. His arrogance was clear for everyone to see. In telling Sayyidah Zainab and others that I wish my ancestors from Badr were here, his arrogance had shone through. But until Sayyidah Zainab and Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhim as-salam stood up and gave their sermons, that is what rattled Yazid. Otherwise, if you're telling me they stayed in Sham for a year, then what did the khutbah do? What did the khutbah do? Sayyidah Zainab says, oh Yazid, do you think God has made you honorable, made us contemptible? Now that in your belief you blocked the earth's zones, the heavens' horizons, you've left no solution for us. Although the plight has made me speak to you, I find speaking to you of no value, but scolding you is great. Therefore, I'll continue to scold you. How ironic it is that the members of the party of Allah are killed by the members of the party of Shaitan. I ask you, my dear brothers and sisters, when you've just said to someone, how ironic it is that the members of the party of Allah are killed by the members of the party of Shaitan. Our blood drips from your pores. Our flesh drips from your teeth. That doesn't cause an uproar. There was an uproar of people straight away. What's going on? Who are these? Because the media was so strong they didn't know who Zainab was. There were people who were living with Zainab when they were younger, couldn't recognize Zainab. So when we say that Yazid kept them in Sham for a year, I ask you then, what is the power of the khutbah of Zainab and Imam Zain al-Abidin? What's the power? Okay, 2 good sermons, well done, get in prison. Well done. The power of the khutbah of Sayyidah Zainab and of Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhim as-salam was what? Was that they rattled. Who is victorious today? Watch with the adhan, then we'll see who's victorious today. Those lines were huge. Yazid in no way could afford to have the blame on him. Who did Yazid blame Karbala on? Ibn Ziyad. If Yazid was so powerful, he's put them in prison, why would he need to say it's Ibn Ziyad's fault? You say it's my fault. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do? What's your issue? What are you going to do about it? Yazid said, you know what? It's not my fault. I didn't see it this way. Because you know there are some who until today say it's not Yazid's fault what happened to Imam al-Hussein. They take it on this basis. Because they say what? They say that Yazid was not at Karbala. If Hitler's not at a concentration camp, then it's not Hitler's fault. Saddam Hussein not executed, it's not Saddam Hussein's fault. They say Yazid was not at Karbala, so it's not his fault. Because Yazid, rattled by this, he wanted to give this impression that, you know what, you know what, I want to make sure, okay, what do you guys want? And that's when he said to Sayyidah Zainab, Kulthum and Imam Zain al-Abidin, what do you want? They said, what you have taken from us, you can never give back to us. You can never give back our beloved. You know what he did? He threw money at them. He said, then take this and go. They're like, you think that we're worth this? This is what we are. So then what do you want? Said, give us the heads of our beloved and give us the spindle of Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. Fatima's spindle, he had it. He said, take it. They said, the heads of our beloved, give that to us, take it. I ask you, if you're saying to me that they spent another year in Sham, then I ask you, then what was so powerful about Bibi Zainab's khutbah? What was so powerful about Imam Zain al-Abidin's khutbah? The reason we believe in the power of that khutbah is because it rattled Sham on that day. Sham was rattled. Yazid had to say, okay, what do you people want? They replied back by saying that we want to return back to Medina via Karbala. There are some people who say, so you're telling me how long then they stayed in Sham? If I ask and get asked by people this question, this is my timeline. Others may differ. This is my timeline. I say that they reach Kufa, 12th of Muharram. They stay in Kufa until 19th of Muharram. They move from Kufa, 19th of Muharram. 2nd of Safar, they're in Sham. They stay in Sham for about a week, 8 days. Then they leave to go back to Karbala. So that means from Sham to Karbala, 10 days, they're back in Karbala. Karbala to Sham is how many kilometers? If it's the longest route possible, let's say 800 km. Okay? And if you're on those camels, this time you're free to go as quick as you want. You're not stopping anywhere now. And you're going on the shorter route. I think you can make it back to Karbala. On when? On the 20th of Safar. I remember Marwan ibn al-Hakam. Marwan ibn al-Hakam, when he had a problem with Mukhtar al-Thaqafi. Marwan ibn al-Hakam sent Ammar, the son of Rabi'a. He said, I want you to finish Mukhtar al-Thaqafi. Where did he send him from? You see, he said, Ali Qadi Taba Taba, and others say, you people say, how could someone return from Damascus to Kufa or to Karbala that quickly? I'm replying to you, there is precedent in people who've done it in 10 days. So why do you doubt the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam were kept in the ruins of Sham? Yes. Bibi died in those ruins. The 3-year-old daughter of Hussein died in those ruins. None of us are denying this. But the idea that they spent 1 year there, and of course, if you want to believe they spent 1 year, it's completely up to you. It's neither here or there for me, whether you believe 1 year or 40. But for me, in that 1 week, which was one of the most horrific weeks anyone will ever face, none of us will understand what they faced. And I'll come slowly to what they faced very shortly. But in that week, the daughter of Imam al-Hussein dies. Sayyidah Zainab gives a khutbah. Imam Zain gives a khutbah. They rattle the whole of Sham. By the 10th of Safar, Yazid decides that, you know what? Na'man bin Bashir, Mukhtar al-Thaqafi's father-in-law, come here, return them back to where they want. Where do you want to go? We want to return back to Medina, where I estimate that they're back in Medina around the 8th of Rabi' al-Awwal. Because Imam Zain al-Abidin, when they left Karbala, Imam Zain al-Abidin camped outside Medina for a bit before they entered. Just to not enter all in one go, he camped for a bit, sent a few of the people to make the people aware that we are returning back from Karbala. Now, Marwan ibn al-Hakam sent Ammar, the son of Rabi'a, to fight Mukhtar al-Thaqafi from Sham to Kufa. How many days did he finish it in? 10 days. 10 days from Sham to Kufa. And nobody questions that. Marwan sends Ammar from Sham to Kufa. We said Kufa, Damascus to Kufa is how many kilometers? 900. Damascus to Karbala is how many? 800. Amr ibn Rabi'a went from Damascus to Kufa. This is one of the examples that are cited. That Amr ibn Rabi'a done it in 10 days. Then said Ali Qadi Tabatabai says, and there's many other examples. People going from Kufa to Damascus. Damascus to Kufa, 10 to 12 days max. So why is it when it comes to the Arba'in of Imam al-Hussein, you give us all mathematics and gymnastics? But when it comes to all these other people, you're ready to say, yes, they completed that whole journey in how many days? Those other people, 10 days. Imam al-Hussein and that kafila, even though there's a longer route and a shorter route, people have a problem. Why are you saying they return on the 20th of Safar? Then we have Jabir bin Abdullah al-Ansari's meeting with Imam al-Hussein, with who? With Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam. That's in that meeting, we have it that they come together when? They come together on the Arba'in of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, on the 20th of Safar. Some people say the following year. Why the following year? Why not the same year? The calculations can easily add up. As I said, you have Ziyarat al-Arba'in of Imam al-Askari, Imam al-Sadiq teaching Safwan, do Ziyarat al-Arba'in. Why do we say the Ziyarat al-Arba'in is a makhsus? It's just random? Dua, the day of Arafah, makhsus. The day of 15th of Sha'ban, for example, makhsus. Day of Arba'een of Imam al-Hussein, this is makhsus. This for us are the nights. They're not just random nights. Rather, there is a particular meaning and a particular purpose. So on the one hand, you have those ulama who may talk of different opinions. On the other hand, if a person looks at it from time frame, or a person looks at it from literature, from the Imams, all of them mention the thawab of ziyarat al-arba'een of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And all of them ask us to remember that this is one of the signs of the mu'min. That amongst the signs are wearing the ring, for example, on your right hand. The marks of, for example, prostration on the earth. 51 ruk'ah of salah, for example. And what do you have? Saying Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim loudly. And ziyarat al-arba'een of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. No doubt that was one of the most arduous journeys that anyone could have ever gone through. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what Zainab and Kulthum saw on these journeys. Every year we talk of these journeys, but I don't think any of us will feel what is it to go from Karbala to Kufa. Then 37 stops, my dear brothers and sisters. 37 stops from Kufa towards Sham, and then not just enter a place, have stones pelted on you, have people hit you, have people slap you. Wallah, I bet inside all of us we know one thing: how much Zainab yearned to return back to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. How much Imam Zain al-Abidin yearned to return back to Karbala. They wanted for the first opportunity to return. Why? Because they were literally paraded like slaves are paraded. Could you ever imagine that the family of your prophet are paraded as prisoners from one place to another? Even to the extent they took them in the court of Yazid, chained them all up together, and they sat them there on the ground. A message reached who? A message reached the wife of Yazid by the name of Hind. This is just an example of what they faced, my dear brothers and sisters. And tonight I want us all to go to Karbala, because there are many who are sitting in front of me now. I know that their heart tonight is in Karbala. Their heart is there next to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. How many of us we yearn that we could be there on a night like this? What's the only way that we can show you how much we wish to be there? The tear that flows from our eye, over our cheek, below our chin. And that's our pledge of allegiance, Aba Abdullah. From far away we call out, Ya Hussein. Wherever we sit, we call out, Ya Hussein. Imagine for them, they're about to leave Sham. The final embarrassment before those sermons, before they stood up, was them sitting on the ground like slaves in the court of Yazid. And Yazid wanting them paraded, and Yazid calling his servant, go and call Hind, let her come here now. This Hind, who was she? When she was younger, she used to serve Zainab. Now Zainab's a slave in front of her. This Hind, she was sitting there, her servant came to her, she said, Madam, get ready. He said, what is it? Said, we have a group of rebels. Allahu Akbar, what has time done? Zainab is a rebel, Zain al-Abidin is a rebel. You found that at that moment she said, rebels from where? They said to her, Karbala. She heard the name, she remembered something about the name, but it wouldn't click together. She then got herself together, she got dressed, she came into the court of Yazid. She's on a throne. The lady she used to serve has chains around her neck. She's on a throne. The lady she used to serve is on the dirt of the earth. She was sitting there on the throne, Sayyidah Zainab, Kulthum sitting next to each other. At that moment, what happened, my dear brothers and sisters? Sayyidah Zainab said to Kulthum, do you recognize her? She said to her, no. She said, you don't remember Hind when we were in Medina? Hind used to come to our house and serve. She said to her at that moment, of course, that is Hind. Because what had happened to Hind? After she left the house of Imam Ali when she was younger, she went towards the house of Imam al-Hassan. She served there, but then Muawiyah forced her to marry Yazid. So now she was sitting here on her throne in Medina. Zainab al-Kubra and Zainab al-Sughra and the others are all sitting on the ground. Hind looked looked towards them. I want to ask you all one question. I wonder how much had Zainab's face changed from that journey that Hind couldn't even recognize Zainab alayhi salam. She couldn't even tell who that lady was. I don't know whether the face changed because of the burning sun or because of the hits of the soldiers of Yazid under the eyes of Zainab alayhi salam. At that moment, Hind looked towards them. She could see the two of them whispering. Hind said, "Excuse me, where are you people from, if I may ask?" Sayyidah Zainab looked towards her. There was quite a distance. Sayyidah Zainab called out, "We are from Medina." The moment Hind heard that, what did Hind do? Hind got off her throne. She sat on the ground. Imagine this scene, all of us. Just remember this scene. If ever you want to hear a musibah, it's this one. She sat on the ground level with Zainab. Sayyidah Zainab said to her, "Why have you sat on the ground?" She said, "Out of respect for the people of Medina." She said to her, "You know, when I was younger, I used to serve in a house in Medina." Allah, Allah, whose house? She said, "I used to serve in a house in Medina. I don't know if you know the members of that house. Do you know the members of that house or not?" Sayyidah Zainab said, "Whose house?" She said, "I don't know if you know them. I used to serve in the house of Ali ibn Abi Talib. I used to serve in their house in Medina." Zainab alayhi salam, at that moment, what did she do? She said, "Yes, we know them." Notice Sayyidah Zainab doesn't say, "That's my dad." Not at all. She says, "Yes, I know them." At that moment, and looked towards her. She said, "May I ask you about some of the members of that house?" Zainab alayhi salam said to her, "You're more than welcome. Ask me about who you want to ask me." She said, "May I ask you, take your heart to him now. May I ask you about Abul Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam." Look who she remembered first, because she remembered the young Abbas when she was in Medina. "May I ask you about Abul Fadl? Tell me about Abbas, the son of Ali. Where is he now?" Zainab alayhi salam looked towards the spear that was in front of her. She said, "Do you see that head on that spear?" She said to her, "Yes." She said, "That's the head of Abul Fadl in front of you." She said to her at that moment, "May I ask you, tell me about Aba Abdullah. Where is Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam?" One of our proofs for the Arba'een are the many traditions that say, not just in Shia literature, that the head of Hussein returned to Karbala, like tomorrow we return to the Arba'een. At that moment she said, "Tell me about Aba Abdullah. Where is he?" Allahu Akbar. Zainab said to her, "Do you see that head on that spear?" She said, "Yes." She said, "That's the head of Hussein alayhi salam." And when she was younger, whenever she'd see Abbas and Hussein, she'd always see Zainab with them. She looked towards her. She said to her, "Tell me, tell me, tell me, tell me, where is Zainab al-Hashimiyya? Where is Zainab, the daughter of Bani Hashim? Tell me, where is Zainab?" Zainab looked towards her and said, "If you're asking me about Zainab al-Hashimiyya, then I don't know where she is." Truly, she doesn't know where she is. She's in Sham. Her hijab ripped off her. Her family away from her. If you're asking me about Zainab al-Hashimiyya, then I don't know where Zainab al-Hashimiyya is. But if you're asking me about Zainab al-Masbiyya, Zainab the prisoner, then here I am, Zainab in front of you. All of a sudden Hind ran out, her hijab falling on the ground. Yazid called out, "Why'd you run out? Pick up your hijab." She looked at him and she said to him, "Yazid, you ask me about my hijab. How about the daughters of Fatima and their their hijab. Yazid, embarrassed by all of this, eventually had to let them go. Tomorrow is the Arba'een. Tomorrow is when they all return to Karbala. I wonder what Rabab felt when she went looking for her baby. I wonder what Ramla felt when she went to look for Qasim. How do all of these mothers feel returning back towards their beloved children's grave? Anyone who's lost a child will tell you how difficult it is to return back to the grave of your beloved one. You can imagine why the poets say Layla looked at the grave, she said, oh, dust don't sting Akbar's body. And Rabab looked at the dust and said, oh, dust don't hurt my baby's neck. And then Ramla looked towards the earth and she said, gather Qasim's body back together. Jabir bin Abdullah al-Ansari had come to Karbala on the Arba'een. When he came to Karbala on the Arba'een, who was on his way as well? Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam. When Jabir came towards the grave of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he did something that every listener would want to do to the grave of the Imam. He called out 3 times, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Habibullah yujib Habiba. Oh Hussein, oh Hussein, oh Hussein, is this the way that the beloved doesn't answer his lover? Then he turned around and he saw the face of Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam. When they saw each other, they embraced each other. They came close to each other. But for Imam Zayn al-Abidin, he wanted to pour his heart out. He wanted to open up. Jabir, ya Jabir, Jabir, oh Jabir, I wish you had seen the way Shimmer sat on that chest. Jabir, oh Jabir, I wish you had seen the way Abbas alayhi salam stood up when he heard al-atash, al-atash. Jabir, I wish you had seen the way the baby flaps its hands like a bird flaps its wing. Jabir, Jabir, I wish you had seen the way they hit Zainab and Kulthum. Jabir, I wish you had seen the way the daughter fell on the head and called out, Abba, Abba, man alladhi قطع رأسك. Father, Father, who is it that has severed your head? Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Raise your hands, my dear brothers and sisters. This is the night of the Arba'een. All of you have your hajat. Ya Allah, do not deprive us of the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Ya Allah, allow us to hold on to the dharih of Syed al-Shuhada. Ya Allah, if our sins have deprived us and have not allowed us to visit the Imam, then forgive those sins, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, we pray for all the Zuwar of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Ya Allah, we remember all of those who lost their lives in 1977 and after 77 walking to the grave of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Inshallah, tomorrow morning, my dear brothers and sisters, we will recite the Masa'ib and the Maqtal of the Arba'een of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam from 11 a.m. on Imam Hussein TV. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to fulfill the a'mal of ziyarat al-Arba'een. Tomorrow, inshallah, we will recite the ziyarah. Let's all come together in our dua. We have brothers and sisters who have cancer. We have those who have heart difficulties. We have those who are facing illnesses. We have those who have problems within their families and their businesses. Let us all come together and recite the ayah wherever we may be. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Amma yujibu al-muftarra idha da'ah wa yakshibu as-su'. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. Ya Allah, raise us with the Imam of our time, Imam Sahib al-Asr wal-Zaman. Ya Allah, do not let us forget the Imam of our time. Ya Allah, bless us with seeing the Imam of our time. Ya Allah, allow us to be alongside and with and supporting the Imam of our time. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the Surah Al-Fatiha in honor of all the marhumin and the marhumin of these majalis. And before that, recite the loudest salawat and welcome our beloved Mullah Muhammad Abbas Kareem.